Everybody for joining us today. My name is Anthony J. Scerbo. I'm an attorney advisor with the Office of Open Government, and this is the Ethics Week 2023 presentation of a Newcomer's Guide to the Open Meetings Act. My colleague Nicholas Weil, our trial attorney, is joining me today. He will be keeping an eye on the chat and letting me know, because I cannot see the chat while I'm presenting, any questions or comments that we receive. So this week, Ethics Week, can't go a day without it. This is all about DC Official Code Section 2-571 at SEC and 3 DCMR or DC Municipal Regulation Section 10400 at SEC. A little bit about us. The Office of Open Government, if you don't know, along with the Office of Government Ethics, is responsible for government transparency and ethics under the Board of Ethics and Government Accountability. We've been operating since 2013, and we are led by Director of Open Government Cal Allen, who you probably saw this morning and will be presenting again later this afternoon. We interpret and monitor compliance with the OMA or the Open Meetings Act, and that act requires that public bodies provide proper notice, access to, and detailed records of their meetings. And we also provide training and guidance on the implementation of the DC Freedom of Information Act. We advocate for government openness and transparency generally, and we also provide assistance and training on parliamentary procedure. A few things to bear in mind. As I say, we provide advice, but we also do conduct training and outreach, and we do investigate complaints and issue advisory opinions, and can in fact pursue legal remedies if necessary for infractions of the Open Meetings Act. This is the staff of the Office of Open Government, my colleagues and myself. So within the Open Meetings Act, we have the preamble, wherein the public policy of the district is that all persons are entitled to full and complete information regarding the affairs of government and the actions of those who represent them. And that's in 2-572, the Statement of Policy. According to the rules of construction within the OMA, or the Open Meetings Act, the OMA shall be construed broadly to maximize public access to meetings. Exceptions shall be construed narrowly and shall permit closure of meetings only as authorized by this act. Generally speaking, a meeting is defined by two key pieces: the purpose, in the case of a DC open meeting, to perform public business. So for example, social gatherings are not considered meetings, and the presence of a quorum, which is an adequate number of participants of voting members of that public body. All meetings with those two required elements, unless specifically and legally exempted, are presumed to be open to the public, and the public must receive advance notice of the date, time, place, and draft agenda of that meeting. Nick, real quick, can I get a radio check just to make sure that everybody can hear me?
I can hear you.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's talk about a meeting as defined by the Open Meetings Act. A gathering of a quorum of a public body, formal or informal, regular, special, or emergency, at which members consider, conduct, or advise on public business, which includes gathering information, taking testimony, discussing, deliberating, recommending. Now, I'm going to note here, it says and voting. It should say and or voting, in my opinion, regardless whether held in person, by telephone, electronically, or by other means of communication. And that's in the definition section of the Act. So again, really quickly, gathering of a quorum of members of a public body at which members consider, conduct, advise on public business, including the following categories. And the gathering can be in person, via telecommunication, or video or the electronic means, which includes internet-based solutions. Let's talk briefly about what a meeting isn't. A meeting is not a chance or social gathering where no public business is discussed. A committee or subcommittee meeting under the public body of less than a quorum of the full body. So if you have a public body and a quorum of that public body is 3 members, say the public body is 5 members and a committee is 3 members, well, that's a quorum of that full body. And therefore that committee is conducting a meeting that would be subject to the Open Meetings Act. However, if the committee is 2 members, then it would not be. A press conference is not a meeting subject to the Open Meetings Act because presumptively a press conference is open to the media and therefore the public has the ability to become aware of it. And according to the statute, an email exchange is not a meeting subject to the OMA. Quorum is a simple majority or more than half unless otherwise established by the enabling legislation of the public body, a mayor's order, or regulations, DCMR, DC municipal regulations. The Director Allen this morning talked about practices in electronic meetings. A public body can in fact meet via video conference, phone conference, or other electronic means if reasonable arrangements are made to accommodate the public's right to attend, all meetings are recorded, all votes are taken by roll call, and all of the provisions of the Open Meetings Act are adhered to. Now, the director made some excellent points this morning as well that I don't have on this slide. Best practices, things that public bodies and the public should be aware of. For example, members of the public are not required to identify themselves. They have the right to attend without being required to identify themselves. Things to bear in mind, this is a newcomer's guide. This is not meant to substitute for a comprehensive training on the OMA. We're available. We provide free trainings, for the district on the Open Meetings Act. What's a public body? It's any government council, including the council of the district, board, commission, or similar entity, including an advisory body that takes an official action by the vote of its members convened for such a purpose, but not certain excluded groups such as the local courts and ANCs, area neighborhood commissions, advisory neighborhood commissions, sorry. So currently ANCs and the courts, for obvious reasons, to this point are not included in the OMA. So these are entities that must adhere to the OMA. LSATs, local school advisory teams. We mentioned councils, boards, commissions, boards of directors. There's a full list on open-dc.gov. Under, I believe the list is called public bodies. Advisory boards that take official action by the vote of their members, and public charter schools boards of trustees. These are not public bodies. The agencies that support these public bodies, for example, under the executive, the mayor's cabinet, advisory neighborhood commissions, the courts, and the professional staff of public bodies who are outside of the presence of a quorum. So if the public body has a professional staff, meaning the full-time employees who are designated by the enabling legislation to support that public body, are meeting outside of the presence of a quorum of the members of the public body, that meeting is not subject to the Open Meetings Act. So just how open is open? Meetings, according to the OMA, have to be open to the public unless there is a permission, a reason based in the OMA for closure. Open means public. It means possibility of a physical presence. Now, obviously, coming out of the pandemic, there was the allowance for fully virtual. Now we are still allowing virtual meetings. However, we also now allow fully physical and we allow hybrid. The news media, physical presence allowed to attend, and television and internet. Now we're going to get into the key factors of conduct, everything about a meeting, including the notice and record and posting of record of meetings. So As far as notice goes, the OMA calls for generating, where possible, an annual schedule of meetings. The general principle is as much notice as possible by the public body to the public. For each meeting, as much notice as possible specifically, but notice must be given at least 48 hours or 2 business days before each meeting, whichever is greater, except for emergencies. Now, when a public body finds it necessary to call an emergency meeting to address an urgent matter, obviously the obvious recent example is the pandemic, notice shall be provided at the same time notice is provided to the members of the public body. So when the notice went out to the members of the public body saying we need to take action regarding the pandemic, noticing the public would have just needed to occur at the same time to be OMA compliant. Where do we post the notice? Notice needs to be posted, 1, in the office of the public body or a location that is readily accessible to the public. Obviously, some offices are not readily accessible to the public. The physical posting requirement had been suspended as a result of the public health emergency. It is now back in place. Additionally, either on the website of the public body itself, its own website, or the district government. Now, by the district government, the Office of Open Government maintains the district government's central meeting calendar. And actually, my colleague, Mr. Kevin Brown, will be presenting this afternoon on instructions for administrative points of contact and how they can post notices, agendas, information about upcoming meetings to the central meeting calendar. The statutory requirement is to post either on the website of the public body itself or on the central meeting calendar. My question generally is, without meaning to be facetious, is why not do both? That gives the greatest amount of access to the public, and it gives the maximum amount of information to the public. Bear in mind, except for emergency meetings, public bodies can either elect to use the internet posting method or post a physical paper notice in the office of the public body or location readily accessible to the public. The notice also has to be published in the DC Register. The specific language in the statute is as timely as practicable. Now, that is not to say that it's when you get to it. It is as timely as it can be submitted. Obviously, there is a delay in the time necessary from when submission is made to the register to when the register is published. But when you know about a meeting, you not only need to do the physical posting and the online posting, but you do need to submit your notice to the register. And we'll talk about what constitutes a notice here in a moment. Relative to the emergency meeting procedure, when the emergency meeting is convened, and this is a meeting, not an additional meeting to your annual agenda. This is a meeting, again, about an urgent matter where you let the members and the public know at the same time as soon as you were able to, but not necessarily 24 hours or 2 business days before. When the meeting is convened, the presiding officer shall open the meeting immediately with a statement explaining, first, the subject of the meeting, second, the nature of the emergency, and third, how the public notice was provided. And that would be, again, the same as how notice was provided to the members of the public body. This is just another recitation, whichever's greater, 40 hours, 2 business days before, physically posted, either the website or the central meeting calendar and the register. Now, what does notice include? This is what I mentioned a moment ago. Notice must include the time of the meeting, the date of the meeting, the location, meaning the physical location, and/or the hyperlink or telecommunication connection information, if it's a virtual or teleconference, and the planned agenda, which in the initial case would be a draft agenda. And if there will be a closed portion of the meeting, which we will talk about in a few moments, The notice also has to include in the agenda the Open Meetings Act citation with the reason that justifies the closed portion of that meeting. So if you're going to have a meeting where you're going, for example, your board or your commission is going to be receiving advice of the board's legal counsel or general counsel, then your agenda needs to state, if you know that that is going to occur, you need to notice the public in your agenda that at agenda item 3, if that's where it happens to fall, the board intends to go into closed session per DC Official Code 2-575 B 4A. I'm just showing off that I can remember something I deal with every day, but and then the citation and the language of that saying that you're seeking advice of counsel. And then at that point in the meeting, you would be able, under the OMA, to go into closure for that portion of the meeting. We'll talk about closure here in just a moment. This just mentions again that as of August of this year, the physical posting requirement has resumed under 2-5762A. And again, the physical notice should be posted as early as possible, but at least 48 hours or 2 business days. In addition to the time, date, location, and agenda, this following statement has to be included below the agenda information, all draft and final agendas. It needs to say, quote, "This meeting is governed by the Open Meetings Act. Please address any questions or complaints arising under this meeting to the Office of Open Government at open.govoffice@dc.gov," quote, end quote. And that's in the Municipal Regulations 3 DCMR section 10409.2. I'm going to take a little sip of water here.
We got a chat question.
Certainly.
That this would be a good time for. Josh Turner asks, how does OOG determine how early is possible to post the notice? You got to post it as early as possible. What does as early as possible mean?
Well, so for example, if your public body, and I don't want to get into what public body it is, let's just say it's a board, your public body determines that you're going to have a meeting and you determine the date and the time and the location of your meeting, then the OMA countenances that you will let the public know. You know, if you decide that, say on a Friday evening, then as soon as possible would be early that next week. It wouldn't be, now this could be a meeting 3 months hence, but as soon as possible is you've made a decision to consider public business 3 months hence, but you know the specifics of this meeting, then the OMA expects that you will provide that public notice as soon as possible. The 48 hours, 2 business days is not a target to shoot for. It's a bare minimum. So if a complaint were received and someone were to allege that, you know, public body X knew 4 months ago that they were going to have a meeting and they didn't notice it, you know, the Office of Open Government in investigating the complaint might have to go back to the minutes or the recording of the public body's meeting and determine, yes, you know, you all determined, public body X, that you were going to have a meeting and you never did provide notice other than mentioning it in this other meeting and didn't follow the rules. That would in fact be a technical violation of the Open Meetings Act. So that's the sort of thing that we go by. We can see on the district central meetings calendar when notice is posted, for example. And, you know, we keep an eye on the public body websites themselves. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself or if you can unmute yourself, or if you want to just respond in chat if that answers your question, Josh. If not, I'm happy to provide more information.
Josh is satisfied. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Josh. All right. We're going to talk about closed portions, also known as executive sessions. under 2-575B. So with closed sessions, I mentioned before, notice shall include, if feasible, a statement of intent to close the meeting or any portion of the meeting, including citations of the reason for closure under 2-575B, and a description of the matters to be discussed, which is under 2-576, section 5. So closure in a meeting has to include the citation, the justification for the closure, which is the reason, and a description of the matters to be discussed. The reason that is in 2 spots on this slide is not because I am dull and repetitive, though I am dull and repetitive, is because what we see so often is folks get pieces or parts of this correct and pieces and parts of this incorrect. You do have to provide the where feasible, meaning in advance, the statement to whatever. You have to include the citation to the proper part of the statute. You do have to include a description of the matters to be discussed, which means if you're seeking advice of counsel, then the description of the matters would be seeking advice of counsel on personnel matters or on a contract. And, then that would be adequate. What we end up seeing is, we're going into closure, we're going into executive session, and that's all, and there's no citation or what have you. And unfortunately, that is inadequate and a technical violation according to the OMA in terms of proper notice. So the full list, and obviously these slides will be available, but this, is a link to the code, section 2-575B, for closed session justifications. But some of the key exemptions that are most frequently used are where there's a court order or statute that requires a public body or a matter to be considered either out of the public's eye or in closed session, for contract negotiations, including contract preparation or preliminary negotiations or trade secrets, the attorney-client privilege with the counsel to the public body. That doesn't just mean that the counsel or an attorney is present. It actually means that a counsel is advising the public body. Public health or safety, where a disclosure of information would endanger the public. For example, homeland issues, counterterrorism, public health, pandemic-related things, certainly. To prevent premature disclosure of an award, for example, in scholastic settings, certain administrative matters such as exams, personnel, students' personally identifiable information. Those are all have subsections within 2-575B that allow citation and closure of closed session within an open meeting. Let's talk about how this works practically. So you're in an open meeting, you've properly noticed it, you've established your quorum, you've started your meeting, you've opened your meeting, you're conducting business. Now you're at the point in your agenda where you're going to go into your closed session. Your presiding officer moves to go into the executive session. The body votes, assuming that a majority of the quorum votes to go into executive session. You go in. Now, the motion needs to include the reference to the OMA citation, as I mentioned before, 2-57B, and whatever subsection you're referencing. The majority of a quorum votes. If they do, you can go into closed session. Now, this takes us back to this morning when Director Allen correctly talked about best practices. We recommend, because in closure, you are still required, and we'll get to recordings, but you are still required to record the proceedings. But because it's in closed session, it can and should, and obviously must, be done separately. So what we recommend as best practice is to have a separate meeting channel or separate meeting function where you can conduct that portion of the meeting and record that portion of the meeting and leave the open portion in place and recording, and leave a placeholder or a placard that explains the meeting will resume shortly. And that way you have both sets of recordings and you don't disrupt or leave people wondering if the meeting has ended. I've been in numerous meetings where they've dropped into executive session and then just discontinued the open session, even though they're required to come back from closed session into open session and where possible report out. That's the quick and easy of how you do it. You know, you go into your closed session, you consider only the material that is covered by the exemption or the reason. You come out, if there's anything that can and should be reported to the public that is not covered by, you know, a confidentiality or, you know, something that is covered by the Open Meetings Act exemption, you report that out to the public and then either conduct the rest of your open session public business, or you can then adjourn the meeting and then end the recording of your open session. This is just a recapitulation of what I just said. Discuss the matters referenced, record them separately, then reopen, and then adjourn. And that's a recapitulation of that. Now let's talk about recordings. So generally speaking, most bodies now, because of the pandemic, certainly have gone to either virtual or hybrid scenarios. So generally speaking, we're talking about video recording, and whether that's live video recording, meaning with a camera in a public body space, like the council uses, or video recording as part of a function like this on WebEx. Some bodies still do teleconference meetings where they would be using audio recording. Transcripts. Some public bodies do use a transcription service. With transcription, you do need to ensure, because if you're going to post it and use a transcript where a transcript is, you know, say there's something happens with your recording, you use a transcript, you do need to make sure that there are no copyright restrictions with posting the information publicly. In the past, there has been some issue with some transcription services saying this is for private use or what have you. So do deconflict with whatever transcription service you're using, that's not an issue. And then, of course, there's the detailed meeting minutes. So all meetings shall be recorded. That means both the open and closed sessions, as I mentioned before, obviously separately. Only when a recording is not feasible, this says detailed meeting minutes shall be taken. What that means is where a recording is not feasible, meaning at the last minute, a recording function is technically not possible, then detailed meeting minutes shall be taken. Detailed meeting minutes should always be taken, because you don't always know when you're going to turn around and find out that a recording didn't happen when you thought it was happening. So a administrative point of contact, a secretary to a public body, what have you, should always be preparing detailed meeting minutes. But where a recording is not feasible for some reason, then the detailed meeting minutes have to be taken. Copies of records, meaning records of the meeting, recordings, minutes, etc., shall be made available according to the statute for public inspection. Minutes have to be available as soon as practicable, but no later than 3 business days after the meeting. Now, public charter schools by statute have no later than 30 business days. Again, back to Josh's question, no later than 3 business days is the bare minimum. As soon as practical means if you have the meeting, it's an evening meeting, yes, the next day, if it can be done practically the next day, then it should be posted the next day, but no later than. The full record, meaning the recording, as soon as practicable, but no later than 7 business days after the meeting. Now, available for public inspection, again, immediately upon request, posted proactively to your website, etc. We're going to talk about this now. Draft detailed mini minutes. Okay, here we go. Audio recordings, video recordings, and transcripts, copies of the full record Yeah, 7 days after the meeting. So this is what the specific DCMR says. Detailed meeting minutes shall contain the date, time, and place of the meeting, the names of members of the public body recorded as either present or absent, and any motions and amendments thereto, a record of all votes taken, and general description of all matters considered. So people who become very anxious or very concerned about their meeting minutes, generally speaking, the meeting minutes have to contain these items. Date, time, and place of the meeting, very easy to capture. Names of the members recorded as either present or absent, again, very easy to capture. Motions and amendments thereto, a record of all votes taken, and general description of all matters considered. If you need to have whoever's taking the minutes, the presiding officer, slow the pace of the conduct of the proceedings so that it can be captured, it is perfectly allowed for the individual to do so, because it is required to capture this information, and a perfectly reasonable request to be made in any event. As far as record maintenance, again, the regulations under 10409.8 requires compliance with district record preservation law and DC general records schedules concerning the dispositions of electronic meeting recordings and written meeting minutes. 2-578A requires preservation of all meeting recordings for a minimum of 5 years. That is not to say that your public body does not have either statutory or regulation requirements that are different than this. This is a minimum requirement. You may have other maximum requirements, minimum requirements that exceed this. But DC Official Code 2-578A requires preservation of all meeting recordings for a minimum of 5 years. So be aware that if you are the person who is in charge of record maintenance, that 5 years, again, is a floor, not a ceiling. If the recording is not feasible, minutes, at least the draft version, must be publicly available after the meeting, the 3 business days. A notation has to be included at the top of draft minutes that final minutes will be posted to the website on the next meeting date. So what's the difference? So a final minutes are minutes that have been adopted by the body. So for example, Public Body X, our friend Public Body X, meets in July. There's minutes from the July meeting. In August, one of the first orders of business of Public Body X in August is to approve the minutes, which they've already looked at and had a month to look through. The presiding officer will say, I move to approve the minutes of the July meeting of Public Body X. All in favor, say aye. They vote to approve it. That then makes those minutes final. So in the interim, after no later than 7 business days, the draft minutes will be posted. After the final minutes, have been approved, they then will be posted on the website. Nick, I'm going to pause here and see if we have any questions.
Nope, doing sailing along fine.
Great, thank you. Okay, in terms of public comment, and this is a question that our staff gets a great deal. There's a lot of confusion on this. A public body may, and I repeat may, have enabling legislation or bylaws that mandate a period for public comment. Again, they may have enabling legislation or bylaws that mandate a period for public comment. In which case, that's their requirement based on their statutory or regulatory authority. The OMA does not, I repeat, the OMA does not require a public body to have a public comment period. But a public body can allow public comment even without a statutory requirement to do so. And if they do, they have the right to regulate the time and the duration of public comments if they want to, unless it's already spelled out in their regulation and bylaws. So no public comment period required by us, meaning the OMA or OG, but you can. You can have a standing order permitting public comment, regulating its time, whether it's germane to the proceeding, the matter before the public body, et cetera. You can set up standards on advanced sign up, but that's all beyond the scope of the OMA and OG's enforcement of same. Cancellations. As applied and as interpreted by this office, a meeting cancellation is a change in schedule. And a change in schedule, in this case, a cancellation, requires as much notice to the public as possible, but again, not less than 48 hours or 2 business days, whichever is greater before the meeting occurs. And to establish a record, the notice of the cancellation or the notice of a change in schedule would have to state change in schedule, or in this case, canceled. Now, the great debate that always occurs on this issue. In most instances, cancellation requires this. If you get to a meeting, at the beginning of a meeting, and say there is a mass snarl up on the Beltway, and a majority of the quorum of a public body is caught in that snarl up and wisely chooses not to join the meeting by phone for safety reasons, and the presiding officer is essentially by themselves with members of the public. They don't have a quorum. They can't conduct the meeting. And so the meeting needs to be rescheduled. That is not a failure in this case, because as much notice was possible, well, there was no possibility of noticing the public because there's no way of anticipating the situation. But where there is the possibility, the expectation is that a cancellation or a change in schedule must meet the requirements of a change in schedule. And again, that subjects it to the notice requirement, which brings us back to 48 hours, 2 business days, whichever is greater before. Now, I talked earlier about emergency meetings. Obviously, a public body may meet in case of emergency. I said the presiding officer has to clearly state the emergency statement, explain how the notice was provided, and provide public how it was noticed. Understand this clarification. Emergency meetings are not special meetings. Special meetings occur outside the regular meeting schedule. So if Public Body X, DC operates on an October fiscal year. So say in October, Public Body X has its first meeting and they establish their annual schedule. But because there's a major event that happens every year, and after the event, Public Body X needs to have 3 or 4 after action meetings, they decide to add several meetings to their annual meeting calendar. Those would be special meetings. There's no emergency. They realize after the event that they need to have these meetings. They add them, but they're not part of the regular meeting, the established meeting schedule. Those are special meetings. And the notice for special meeting is the same as a regular meeting, minimum of 48 hours, 2 business days. But understand that again is the floor, not the ceiling. It's as soon as possible. Emergency meetings are reserved for true emergency situations and truly urgent matters where meetings have to occur and advance notice is just not possible. Emergencies include instances that pose an immediate threat to health, safety, welfare, destruction of property. Now, for some reason, slides are not advancing. I apologize. I'm going to escape and go back. There we go. Complaints. If a member of the public, member of the media, member of DC government, any aggrieved party, including anonymous parties, complains to OG for relief, they can complain either about a meeting that has occurred or about a meeting that may be occurring in the future. Except with allegations of imminent prospective violations, meaning I see that a meeting is posted in 3 days, and Public Body X is going to take up the following business, and it's clear from this that they're going to go into closed session, or they're going to consider the following, and they haven't noticed the meeting. And I'm sorry, let's make it under 2 days. Tomorrow they're going to meet.
You muted yourself, Anthony. We're lip reading you, Anthony.
Yes.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that?
Go back to 2 days. There, we lost you for like 20 seconds.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you. So, all right. So if there's prospective means in the future, past meetings of the past. If there is a allegation of an imminent prospective violation, meaning tomorrow Public Body X is going to have a meeting and they didn't notice it, then we would have to immediately deal with the allegation. If, on the other hand, Public Body X had a meeting last January and someone issued or served us with a complaint, we would then give the public body 30 days to respond, with a possible extension up to 5 business days. Now, the Director of Open Government can seek to resolve the dispute through multiple avenues, and usually does seek multiple ways to bring relief. Conciliation is possible where there is not either authority or a legitimate issue, can dismiss the complaint, can release an advisory opinion on the subject, or take any other step, including, filing suit permitted by the OMA and DCMR, the regulations. So we do have enforcement powers regarding the OMA, and they do come into play. APCs, our friends, our liaison, administrative points of contact. Just as the Freedom of Information Act officers, with respect to DC FOIA, we have administrative points of contacts, and we view them as the legally responsive person in a public body to whom we address all OMA violations or other concerns. So whenever your administrative point of contact duties change hands, please let us know who that is, and report the name and the contact information to us. You can either contact one of us individually or, send an email to our general inbox, open.gov office@dc.gov. Normally we have one administrative point of contact per public body. And as I said before, and I'll mention again at the end, our IT specialist, Mr. Kevin Brown, is going to be presenting on how to post on the central meeting calendar, and that will be a special note to administrative points of contact. For access, again, access the user side of open-dc.gov. We offer the CMC as an alternative, the central meetings calendar, for district-wide convenience and uniformity. I always ask, please, where you can, post on your own website and on the central meeting calendar, make things consistent, and also, create 2 places where if people are looking for your information, they can find it. Now, I mentioned under complaints what we can do. This is just in terms of enforcement, besides the advisory opinions, which clearly is a remedy. Beyond the advisory opinion and making determinations, we do have the ability to bring suit in Superior Court for injunctive and or declaratory relief for violations before or after a meeting takes place. So under 2-579, we do have the ability to go to file suit, and Superior Court may order an appropriate remedy, such as requiring more notice, postponing a meeting, or issuing fines up to $250 per violation. So do bear in mind, as the director said rightly this morning, we're not a gotcha agency. We do not spend our days at Superior Court. We are not looking to make this more difficult, but we take our charge seriously, and the district's policy is transparency and open governance. And we want to help agencies support their public bodies, and we want to help support public bodies supporting the citizens of DC and the government of DC. So the best way for us to do that is to work with you all to train and to provide advice and, frankly, to monitor and provide support and assistance where we can. On that note, we also have the ability to provide parliamentary procedure training. As a part of that, we now offer free access for public body members to Robert's Rules Made Simple. And we have our own portal. You can see here at the homepage, Welcome to the District of Columbia, Robert's Rules of Order Training Portal. It's at https://robertsrulesmadesimple.com/DC. And you can get credentials through us. You can contact us either through our main inbox or through Mr. Brown, our IT specialist, or my colleague, Attorney Weil, and you'll be given access, and you can take the trainings that are available on this as well. But we also have the ability to conduct trainings on parliamentary procedure for public bodies or small groups. So, and we have that requirement and authority under 3 DCMR 10408.2, where we may provide advice and training on it upon request. So in addition to general parliamentary procedure training, it's a good practice for the APC, the administrative point of contact that I mentioned before, to have scripts and to write scripts for presiding officers to use to help them move smoothly through a meeting and to ensure, frankly, compliance with the OMA and the body's internal policies, because there may be bylaws or other statutes. We are happy to help APCs and presiding officers with developing these scripts and even sitting in on meetings and watching and helping to fine tune such things so that a presiding officer can just follow a script according to the agenda, but have the verbiage that they need to conduct an efficient and effective meeting and to maximize the public body's time and success. Please contact us and we'll be happy to help you with that. These are some key sources for you. Obviously, our website, open-dc.gov, which includes the central meeting calendar. At OpenDC, you will find the OMA compliance checklist, which we created, which is a great first stop or a general reference resource on OMA compliance. This is the DC official code section for the OMA. And this is where the DC municipal regs on the OMA happen to be. As I mentioned and foreshadowed, day 3 continues with Ethics Week for the OOG Day at 2:45 in about 25 minutes. My colleague, Mr. Brown, is presenting how to post on the CMC, Central Meetings Calendar. And then 15 minutes or so after that concludes, Director Allen is presenting at 3:30 an overview on recent Open Meetings Act and DC FOIA advisory opinions and advice, which is just what it sounds like. And I look forward to seeing you all at those. And with that, this is our contact information, the same folks I showed you earlier, including myself. Please feel free to get in touch with us if we can help you in any way with either the OMA or DC FOIA or parliamentary procedure or IT issues related to open-dc.gov. And with that, we'd like to thank you and wish you all a good day. Nick, let's do one more quick check for questions or comments.
Thumbs up. We're all taken care of.
Great. Everyone, I would like to wish everybody a great day and suggest that after Director Allen's presentation at the end of the day this afternoon, that everybody get out and enjoy some sunshine and have a good one.